Okay, here we go with the first little video, hopefully in a series. There was so much clamoring on the internet for we want more, we want more. I'm just kidding. Even if only one person views these pieces, that's okay if someone gets something out of it. Now, I apologize for my uh, fluorescent yellow dots on the fingerboard. The truth is, two of my guitars, which I'd like to use when we're talking about chords especially, don't have fingerboard dots. So the fretboards are all blank, and it really is hard to follow if you're watching. So I stuck on a bunch of these little colored dots. I have blue ones on the carving that you might see if you stick through this segment and watch another one if you can stand it. So we're going to call this first segment intervals, or we could call it the Rosé hour for reasons of which I probably won't mention, but I'm assuming that we all know how to build a major scale and what whole tones and half tones or semitones are. I'll just do quick review. So if I start with a note D here, and I move up 2 frets, that's a whole step. If I move up 2 more frets, that's another whole step. Then I move up 1 fret, that's a half step or a semitone. Then I move up a whole step, another whole step, another whole step, and finally a half step brings us to 8 notes above where we started, which is called the octave. It's a pattern of whole note, half note, whole note, whole note, whole note, half note. And those are translated on our instruments, 2 frets, 2 frets, 1 fret, 2 fret, 2 fret, 2 frets, and 1 fret. So that's basic. So let's hear. This is unison, okay? And in music theory, all these intervals have various names. This is called a perfect interval, and I'll try to demo that a little bit later. Then we have this interval here going up to the E note with the D against it. Let me pick them together so you can hear them. That's a second. It's called a major second. It's a little dissonant, but in the right setting and the right register and so forth, it can sound unbelievable. Here's a third, major third. Very familiar sounding to all of us. Then we'll move up a half step to a fourth, and that's called a perfect fourth. Again, I'll explain that a little later, maybe, or maybe not. We go up another 2 frets to the 5th of the chord. That's a perfect 5th, and you'll recognize that as the power chord. That you have a little bit more of a full power chord. If you add a little overdrive, very stable. That's why they call some of these intervals perfect, because the physical properties of the notes, they don't go crazy with each other. They lay in nice and stable. Then you go up to the 6th. That's a major 6th. Nice sound. You'll hear that in all kinds of pop music and classical music, etc. Jazz. Then you go up to the major 7th. Again, dissonant, but an awesome interval. And you'll hear that in all forms of music. Maybe not isolated like this. That major 7th moves up to the octave. That's called a perfect interval. It's an octave. Okay, very stable. Put all the overdrive on it you want. Okay, so there you have the basic intervals of the major scale. Now, in between those, if you adjust those either closer together by 1 fret or semitone, or further apart by 1 fret or semitone, you have another whole set of intervals and sounds that are created. So let me just quickly go through that. We have the unison, and we have a major second. Well, if you drop that down and shrink it by 1 fret closer to the other note, that's a minor 9, minor 9th interval, major 9th interval. Then you go up to the major 3rd. If you shrink that by 1 fret, that's not quite as dissonant. It sounds pretty stable. That's a beautiful minor 3rd. Okay, it's the basis for all the minor tonalities. So the minor 3rd. Then you go up to the perfect 4th is only 1 fret. Now you go up to the 5th, but again, in between the 4th and the 5th is this interval here. Okay, so you could call that a diminished 5th, or you could also call it an augmented 4th. So diminished means you shrink it, augmented, of course, you're expanding it. So you take the 4th, expand it by 1, then you're up to the 5th. Then you go up to the augmented 5th. You could also call that a minor 6th. Then you're up to the 6th, major 6th. Then you go up to the 7th, again in the major scale, but now we're going to fill in between. That's the flatted 7th, so it's called a minor 7th interval. So I'm going to go right from the minor 7th interval up to the octave. Now we're getting a little bit of the pentatonic in there. So the thing to do, if some of these names or intervals are maybe a little bit new to you, you got to connect it with something you know. Probably a good example would be here's the 5th again. That's the augmented 5th. That's the flatted or the minor 7th. Start all over again. So a little bit of Zeppelin's Kashmir as a good example of hearing some of those intervals. If you take 2 notes and put them together, you basically have a mini chord. Okay, it sounds, if you start doubling them up and adding more octaves, you're going to get a fuller sounding chord. So that's where the idea of, I had mentioned in that last video about, I call them dyads. Some people call them dyads, or like the power chord is a good example. It's a 2-note chord, a little mini chord. So if you take the D and the G and start adding more D's and G's to thicken it up and clean that up a little bit, okay? That's a real common open G that a lot of guitarists love. I like it. It eliminates the 3rd, so it's called a G5. Then you have like something like the D5. It's just a D, an A, and a D. You could add another A on top. Those are all open position chords. You could also do the same with E. E, B, and E. Okay, that's just basically 2 chords. 2 notes. E and B. Rosé time. Here we go. So now you have E, E, B, and E. There's another favorite guitarist chord. So there's a lot you can do with 2 notes, is my point. It's amazing. And now you have a lot of other common intervals that are used as well. Nice sounds. We mentioned before the 4th. Okay, so if we went from D, E, F sharp, G, okay, that's a 4th. Those are used all the time. You hear a lot of 4ths in all kinds of different music. What else? You hear 6ths all the time. 6ths, a lot of times you'll hear it as chordal fills. let's stick around the D sound, I guess, for now. There's a 6. You hear it all the time. Minor 6 and major 6. You also have tenths, very popular with guitar players, because you take the third of the chord, which is F sharp in this case, D, E, F sharp, the third. Okay? So now I'm going to go up an octave from that F sharp and play the low D, the first D, with the F sharp. Okay? Tenths sound amazing in all kinds of applications. Beautiful. Take the root, and I forgot to mention that the root, we're building all this off of the first note in the scale, which is called the root. Just like the root of a tree, it all grows out of that. I'll try not to do too much of this because it looks bizarre, but so you got the root, okay? Then you go up to the fifth. There's the power chord. Now what if I went up to the 10th and get a nice spread there? Well, if you combine those 3 notes, it becomes a triad, and we're going to get into that in the next session. But if you spread them out, the triad out, it sounds very familiar. Those of you who like Eric Johnson, he loves those spread intervals. So I'll just close with that as a sort of a teaser, maybe. If you want to watch another segment on triads, we'll add the third note. Whoa, it's getting out of control. First we have 2 notes, now 3. Okay, so let me just wrap this up with a list there of what we talked about. You're building from the root, which is the first note of this major scale. And then from that you combine the other degrees of the scale, and some of them can be lowered or raised, as we called sometimes minor or diminished or augmented and so forth. So I'm not going to get into this list too much, but I put it up there if you want to take a look back at it, if it's of any use to you at all. It's laid out there. We will talk about compound intervals more when we get into extended chords, where you have 11th chords, 13th chords, 9th chords, and so forth and so on. And then you start altering those, and you can get a whole bunch of great sounding stuff, so I'll save that for the segment on when we do 7th chords. And I just wanted to encourage you, this is a toolbox. Use the toolbox how it will help you. The particulars of how you apply it or how you understand it in your own playing or writing it's individual, but there are certain basics that we could cover, and that's what I hope to do. Your imagination is the only limit there, really. The other thing is that maybe you want to be soloing more. A lot of guitar players, they just want to play lead all the time, lead, lead, lead. Well, all the best lead players I know throughout the history of our instrument, in the rock era, say, are all fabulous rhythm players. It starts with rhythm. Well, there might be some exceptions. B.B. King, I don't think, played chords much or knew too much about chords, but a rare exception. If you're B.B. King, who cares, But most of us are not B.B. King or some other amazing savant in music. We're just regular people trying to make the best music we can make. That said, is that it's a great foundation for you. I hope you explore chords, and I hope you really take it to heart and enjoy everything about it and build it into the language of your music. All right, so I'll see you next time, so to speak. That sounds pretty corny, but I don't care. Rosé out.